Culturally in Australia, I don't think it's a normal thing to talk about how you're feeling, particularly in the demographic that is susceptible to suicide. So I'm doing the ride to raise awareness for Are You OK Day and suicide prevention more generally. I just want to get people talking with their friends, family, colleagues about how they feel. I think it's as simple as that. A quick conversation could have a lasting impact on someone's life. 11 days I'll be away, all things going to plan. Melbourne to Brisbane.
Are we ready to set off? Everyone wish Scott luck. Yay!
Ciao. Bye.
Talk to you soon.
I think it's something he committed to a while ago, so a few years ago, wanting to make sure he did something to recognise suicide prevention in Australia, and given one of his managers committed suicide a few years ago, and knowing, as I said, that he's quite a strong-willed person, he would do something. So the main purpose is to make sure that that awareness is raised around suicide prevention. But yeah, there is an element of worry, but you know, you just got to think positive and think about the bigger picture and why he's doing this, and it's got to make a difference. You know, we've got to make sure this means something.
Now we're off for the second leg, or the third leg. It's a beautiful morning again, and Scott is feeling fine. Here's Scott launching off Eden. And just remember, today is Are You OK Day, so make sure you have a conversation with someone and ask them how they're going. You never know what we might find out.
Hi, Daddy.
All right, well, obviously you guys are aware I've been riding a jet ski up the coast, started down in Victoria and have been heading north over the past 8 days. The whole aim of it is actually not to ride a jet ski from Melbourne to Brisbane. The aim is to raise as much awareness as I can about Are You OK and suicide prevention. The road toll in Australia is about 1,500 people per annum. The suicide toll is actually 3,000. So we lose twice as many people to suicide as we lose in car accidents on the road. And for Australians between 15 and 44, it's actually the biggest killer. And it's disappointing that not more people know this. I think that's the real beauty of Are You OK? It doesn't take a huge amount of resource. It's just a conversation, and that's what their whole message is about, is having a chat with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and it's something everyone can do. There's no barriers to that. If I only get a handful of people talking and it actually has an impact on someone, then I've achieved my objective. I really just wanted to talk about the Are You OK message and let them know how simple it is, and to really get them talking to each other. And really that was the intent. It was that simple. Great to be home, but I think this is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. And there's a huge number of people out there who have been impacted by suicide. So while it's good to be home, I really appreciated the trip.
First of all, thanks very much to Wayne and Fiona for inviting me here to talk about this topic. And it is a topic that's important, and it's important for all of us. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my story and why I'm here, and you've seen a little bit there. But more importantly, I'm going to talk through Are You OK? And a practical toolkit that all of us can use with our friends, family and colleagues at work. Current environment does make things different, and as Wayne talked about, there's a whole range of challenges that people are facing across the country and across the globe at the moment that make this topic more important or more prevalent. Now, I do want to talk, and will talk a little bit about that. If I go back and start at my story, touched on a colleague and losing a colleague at work. And up until that point in time, I'd lived a fairly privileged and sheltered life. I'd never lost anyone close to me, and if I had, it was old age or something equivalent. So I hadn't been through a traumatic situation, particularly a traumatic situation that I was particularly close to. In my bio, Wayne mentioned that I was one of the first responders. The colleague was a quarry manager, so it goes back to my time pre my current role. I was quarry operations manager for our New South Wales business, or our Sydney Metro business. We had a quarry just north of Sydney, a quarry manager that I'd actually worked for as a graduate, so I'd known this guy for an extremely long period of time. And just by pure chance, he grew up in the same hometown I did, south of Sydney, even born in the exact same hospital. So there was a connection there independently of when we knew each other or first met each other. That particular day, I had to deal with people, first responders, so people or members of my team who found our colleague. I had to deal with family members, had to start planning how to talk to a site who'd lost their leader and someone who had been there for a huge amount of time. I had to deal with the police and ambulance and the emergency services. Now, I mentioned before I was completely oblivious. Going through the process set me on a journey of discovery about mental health, about suicide, and ultimately that's why I'm here talking to this group today. If I put a little bit more context, my quarry management team was a very small team. There was 5 quarry managers, myself and a few development people, a lot of people under that, but the actual management team was small and tight, and I was the most junior member of the team. Everyone else had been with the company 20 years plus, and most of them had been in their existing role for 10 years plus. So they worked extremely closely together for a long period of time. The other bit is one of my other quarry managers also was born in the same hospital as myself and the other colleagues south of Sydney, and was actually married to this gentleman's sister. So I had 2 quarry managers that were brothers, or effectively brothers in law, and I actually had to call him up and tell him what was going on, and then have the subsequent discussions, make sure that he was okay for that subsequent period. And the reality was he wasn't okay, I wasn't okay. It was a really, really tough thing to handle, and quite open about the fact that toughest thing I've ever had to deal with in my career, and I highly doubt I'll ever have to go through something like that again. Sitting in the boardroom the next morning at the operation, strategising with the supervisory team, with other managers that we'd called to site to help us, about how to inform the workforce, is when I really realised how impacted I was and had been. I turned up to site about 4:30 that morning to address site for shift start or shift changeover. It was effectively a 24-hour or close enough to 24-hour operation, and we needed to get there early in the morning to notify the employees of what had happened. My plan was for me in a standard quarry toolbox talk to address the site much the same way as I am right now, stand up in front and let them know what had happened. Every time I stood up to go and do it, I broke down in tears, and ultimately someone else had to go and do it. The next portion of that morning was sitting in that boardroom with what you would consider some of the oldest, toughest, most resilient hands that you could possibly imagine. Guys who'd been around, or people who'd been around the industry for a long time, and anyone who's worked, well, a lot of construction people here, but anyone who's worked around quarries knows that it's traditionally a rough, tough environment, and people don't show a huge amount of emotion. Again, most of that team I'd known for my entire career with the company from when I'd started as a graduate, and sitting in a room watching those guys with tears coming out of their eyes, inconsolable, led me to make a commitment to do more to raise awareness for mental health and suicide. And that's why I'm standing here today. About 18 months after making that commitment to the team, I realised I hadn't done a huge amount to live up to that commitment, to actually raise awareness, and particularly inside of our own organisation. And that's where the jet ski ride come about. I needed and wanted to do something that would get people in Hanson talking, and I thought if I rode a jet ski from Melbourne to Brisbane, stopping at operations along the way, it would give me a talking topic, it would get some interest, and it would ultimately help raise the profile of Are You OK and mental health awareness. A lot of people ask me why I choose a jet ski trip. Again, construction, mining, quarrying, boats, motorbikes, fishing, that type of thing, all activities that people are interested in. I'd spent most of my or all of my professional career in the industry, so I knew that this type of activity would be something that 2, 3, 4 years later I could walk on the site and people who'd known what I'd done would automatically start talking about the trip, which would lead into conversations about other things. So that's why I'm standing here talking now. And I say it's important to all of us, and it is important. There's not a single person I've spoken to along the way who hasn't been impacted in one way or another, whether it be from mental health problems with themselves, with friends, with people around them, or specifically with suicide as well. And really this is about, and from here forward in my presentation, this is about the toolkit that I talk about. Are You OK talk about their 4 steps, and we're going to go through that. And the call to action at the end of this is for this group to actually utilise it. It's simple, it doesn't cost you anything but a bit of time, and you never know what it might achieve. If you look at the slide up here, it says you don't have to be an expert to ask, are you OK? And that's 100% true. That's about being human. We generally say it when we meet someone or greet someone, sometimes with genuine intent, sometimes out of courtesy. This is about ensuring that when you do it with genuine intent. It's about checking in on people who you know and ensuring that they're okay. If we look at this point here, and this is important, you can help. You never know, or you might not know when you actually have helped, but you can help. And reaching out to people is important. And as we talk through these steps, and as I reference my story, knowing what I know now, I could have done more. And I think everyone says that to themselves and asks those sorts of questions. But the truth of the matter is, if I knew what I knew now, I would have been prepared to ask more questions. I would have known to ask more questions, and I would have known what to do if the answers to those questions come back in such a way that something needed to be done. And if I take one piece of solace out of this situation, it's the fact that I do know that now, and I can communicate it to other people. If we have a look at being connected, and it's kind of interesting, we've just had Are You OK Day. It was middle of September or beginning of September. Hands up if you around the office, people walk up and go, "Are you okay?" in that robotic sort of fashion. Who's observed that? I've certainly observed it during my time being aware of Are You OK? And when it first kicked off, and when Hanson first started celebrating the day. But it's actually not about asking one specific question. It's about being connected. And if you look here, any format, picking up the phone, using digital technology, we're streaming, well, could be streaming anywhere across the planet right now. There's no barrier to connecting with someone. I'm assuming a lot of people in the room, if not everyone in the room, knows people in Melbourne or Victoria. Hands up if you've actually picked up the phone and asked people down there how they're going. And that's great to see. That's what we're talking about, just a genuine question. So what are the signs? Who might you ask the questions to? And I'll come back and break down the 4 steps in a discrete manner in a minute. Anyone have a clue on what the signs might be? What might prompt you? Why did you call those people in Victoria? People who put up their hands. They're in isolation. They're going through a life-changing event. So it's something different. And a very simple answer to this question, what are the signs? It's whenever someone is going through something different or when they're exhibiting something in a different way. So, do you know that a colleague or a friend is going through a breakup? Are they going through a period of isolation because of circumstance like we're going through now? Are they under financial hardship or pressure? All of those things are a sign that that person might need some support. In terms of the individual themselves, and this is the important part that I wish I knew more about back at the time, and this is about them acting differently to what they otherwise would. They're usually a happy person and they mellow out. If they're usually a mellow person, they all of a sudden perk up, they're acting differently. If they catch up with you every Wednesday at the pub or restaurant for a meal and they stop turning up, if they're in your sporting team and they stop arriving to games on the weekend, all of these things are a sign that something might be going on in that person's life. And it might be a really positive thing. They stop turning up on a Wednesday night because they've got a new relationship. That could be a really good thing for that individual. It could be a negative thing. It's something they need some support with. And that's the point. If we look at the current environment, and it is an interesting one, particularly if we take Melbourne. Brisbane obviously went through a period of it. The face-to-face contact we usually have gives us a lot of indications about individuals and what they're doing. What other things might you look out for? Someone who starts using social media more than they otherwise would. So if you just see a flurry of posts start coming through, or they start reaching out with some other form of digital communication, if they're usually fast to respond and they stop responding. again, those things are signs that you can pick up on and be alert to reach out to people. Just talked about this, and this one here obviously is important right now as well. Talking to a group here who works in credit, you're quite often dealing with people who are going through or potentially going through some form of financial hardship. As a person, you have a responsibility to think about that aspect through your job as well. And for me, I've got to make a lot of hard calls in my job. I'm General Manager of Logistics for Hansen Australia. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made around cost and people and other things through the course of my job. But that doesn't stop me making sure that I'm considering the person and things I can do for those individuals around support. And the reason why I'm saying that is everyone has an obligation through their dealings with other humans to think about the impact on that individual. It doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what the environmental context is. I've mentioned work. It could be something completely different. Sorry. I'm now going to talk through the Are You OK steps, and for me, this is the bit I want you to remember out of today. So anyone has a guess what the first step in the Are You OK 4 steps process is?
Identify somebody that might need conversation.
Yep, so combine those two, and it's to actually ask the question. So if we go through all those things we just talked about there, different people acting differently, people going through a challenging circumstance in their life, it's to actually ask the question. For me, that part is actually the easy part. The next bit is the tough bit, step 2. Anyone has a guess what step 2 might be? You've been through this before. It's to listen. And I say this is the hard bit, and this is where knowing how to respond and how to have a conversation is important. If you ask someone how they're going, it's important to let them talk, and it's important for you to listen to what they have to say. The reason why I say that, I'm an engineer. Inherently, that means through my professional career, I've been designed to solve problems. And what does that mean? Quite often it means instead of listening to someone, you try to solve an issue for them. Dismissive comments that come from that, oh, you'll be right, don't worry, you'll be fine tomorrow, you're pretty tough, don't worry about it. They're all the sorts of things that undermine that person's problem and potentially undermine how they're feeling at a particular point in time. So it's really important that you listen, and Are You OK talks about listening without judgment. What types of comments might be appropriate when you're having those conversations? Yeah, acknowledgement of their issue. The other thing is supportive comments. I'm here for you. Those types of things, just to let the person know that you're there to help them with whatever they need help with. Those things are supportive without being dismissive. And if we go back to those initial comments, we all say those things with good intent. Now, I'll go back to something in the video that's worth touching on. My wife's talking in that video and she references the term commit suicide. It's actually, when you're talking about suicide, you shouldn't use the word commit. And there's a solid reason for that. It stems back to the time where suicide was a criminal offence. If you have family members of someone who has taken their life and you use that type of terminology, it can be offensive to them. It's not offensive to you when you say it, you probably don't even think about it. And those dismissive comments are exactly the same. You're saying it with good intent, you don't realise what the communication is, but you can undermine that person's issue and the thing that they're confiding in you. What's the third step? That's the final step. Yeah. Encourage them to take action. And this is the bit where we don't need to be an expert. And quite often, particularly when you're talking about this topic, people don't want to ask how someone is because they don't know how to respond if that person needs help. All you need to do is encourage them to do something about it. I don't think anyone in this room is a mental health expert, but we're not medical experts either. If someone comes to you and they've got a funny patch on their skin, you encourage them to go and have a chat to their doctor. With mental health problems, it's exactly the same. It's about knowing what avenues you've got and encouraging that person to go and utilise those avenues. What avenues are out there? So GP is an excellent place to start. We're very lucky to live in Australia, and I say this to people, and I think through COVID, more people probably realise this, but we do get free healthcare, and your GP is an excellent resource. If I go back to that reference to a blemish on your skin, your GP refers you to an expert. When it comes to mental health problems, they do exactly the same thing. They listen to the problem and they direct you to whatever guidance or help you need. What else is there? Sorry? Yep, there's a whole range of organisations out there. You've got Beyond Blue, Lifeline, Are You OK has good guidance, but one thing Are You OK isn't, which Lifeline and Beyond Blue are, they're intervention services. So they're trained and have people and facilities available to intervene when people need it. And that's exactly what they're there for. So if you're speaking with someone and they're in a very down state, that's definitely an avenue or something you can reference them to do. Hey, how about you call this number? What other avenues have you got? Yep, and I've seen a list of attendees there. I'm not sure who's in the room, but I've seen Wholesome and Boral. I'm from Hanson. I know that organisations of that size absolutely have an employee assistance program. Those avenues and those tools are excellent. And I say they're excellent, again, they can help people to go and get the help that they need. Final step. We already had the final step over here, which is check back in. So if you encourage someone to go and do something, then follow up a week or two later. Hey, did you go and see the doctor? Did you utilise the employee assistance program? Even if they say they're all right, if you've reached out and asked the question, check back in a couple of weeks later and say, hey, just checking back in, how are things going? Super important. And again, this is about that connection. So if I summarise back through the 4 steps, the first one is to ask the question. Second one is to listen and listen without judgment. Third one is to encourage that person to take action if they need some help. And the final one is to check back in with that person. If you go to that first step, someone is acting a little bit differently at work. So they're generally pretty punctual and they start turning up late. How might you approach that person? Do you walk up and ask that "Are you okay?" question I mentioned, or is there another way that you can approach it? Yeah, you can invite them out for a coffee. When you get to that point, what do you say to them? It's as simple as that. I notice you've been turning up late last week. That's unlike you. Is there anything going on? So it's quite simple. And I'll go back to my story. Again, knowing what I know now, I could have had that conversation. And a lot of other people could have as well. But I was blind, and I think a lot of other people were blind as well. That's why it's important we know. We know what the signs are, and we know how to have the conversation and what to do pending the outcome of that conversation. So my call to action to everyone in this room is to actually utilise those steps, spend some time reaching out to people around you, talk about Are You OK Day. Are You OK Day is not a day, it's every day, and it's simple. It's about genuine connection and consideration for the people around you that you care about. Absolutely, and that's an excellent point to raise. The other one, and this is actually a new presentation, I usually do a different one, and they talk about how do you deal with denial. So someone says, no, I'm right. Again, it's simple. You just say, no problem, I'm here if you need me. And check back in again in a couple of weeks' time. You can't force yourself on someone, and you can't force something out of someone, but you can absolutely let those people know, or let that person know that you're there. And that's the exact same example. It's about the presence, and it's also just letting them know that you're there to support. And if we go back to the construction and mining/quarrying industry, you do have a lot of people who don't want to necessarily show outwardly how they're presenting or how they're feeling, which again is fine. That's their prerogative. We're all individuals. Our job as friends or colleagues is just to let them know that you're there if required.